Hello friends, I am so glad that you're here. There's 5 people here already. We just got started. All right, thanks for coming. I'm glad you're here, and it's been a couple weeks. I was out visiting my family back west last weekend, and so I took Sunday off, but I'm back, and so I've got like 2 weeks worth of knitting and information and research to share with you. Yeah, I've been learning a lot, just like I do every week. If you're new here, introduce yourself in the comments. We're a small, but we're an enthusiastic group. And I'm Kelly from KnitSwag, and today we're going to be talking about number knitting, of course, because that's what we talk about every week, because it's the best knitting book. Okay, so I've been thinking about, well, first of all, if you're new here, number knitting, 1952, it only had a single print run, and it was almost lost to history. It's the original modular garter stitch book, and it laid the foundation for all the other modular knitting books and techniques that followed it. And I've dedicated a good chunk of the last 8-ish years of my life to figuring out why. What is so special about this book that people are just missing? And so I am peeling back the layers and learning about Virginia. This is our beloved Virginia, and her method and her history and her influences. And so today we are going to talk about all of that. Welcome, Maura and Anita and Mishivi. Hello. Oh, you were in Oregon. I was in Idaho last weekend. Yes. So now I'm back on the correct time zone. I was a little sleep deprived. I stayed on East Coast time the whole time that I was on the West Coast, and when I got back, I was a little wrecked because I didn't get enough sleep the whole time I was away. But anyway, I'm all recovered now, so that's great. And I got a lot of knitting done on the plane, which I will show you. One of the things that is great about number knitting and a lot of the patterns in this book is that they call for lace weight yarn. And so I have, no joke, I've got like 2 weeks worth of knitting in this little bag right here, like completed knitting. Like if I was to do that with worsted weight yarn, no way it would fit in a knitting bag on the airplane. All right, so let's talk about Virginia. So I've been trying to figure out. I've been going through the introduction of the book, and if you don't have a copy of the book, I get it, because first of all, the hard copies are really, really hard to find. Incidentally, I've been kind of thinking about like putting together a database, and just for my own personal curiosity, because I know there's a few dozen copies in libraries like around the country, and I think there's one in the UK. But most of them are private libraries, and the ones that are in public libraries, there's like, most of them are special collections. You're not even allowed to leave the building with them. And I think there's like 5, maybe 5 in the whole country that you can actually check out. And so I've been thinking how fun it would be to like track down not that I could track down, they'd have to like let me know, like, hey Kelly, we have a physical copy, like to see how many of these things are actually still in existence, like the hard copy. I think that would be neat. My particular copy doesn't have any, you know how a lot of times the book will have like, to my beloved, Nellie or whoever, it'll have like who it was gifted to, and my particular copy doesn't have that, but I think it's neat to come across books that do, and like I'd love to learn who got their copy of Number Knitting and when and from who. But anyway, I digress. So I've been thinking about the introduction to the book, and so let me show you that. Let's go over here. So the introduction to the book, I did, and I've mentioned this before, I did a whole video where I read this thing out loud, and when I did that, it was like a year ago, and I was just reading it like I didn't really know what I was reading, like the gravity of what I was reading. I just read it out loud, and but the longer that I go through this book and I like dig through the history, the more I realize, oh my gosh, she gave us a whole timeline, and she gave us like from like the 30s up until the 50s when this thing was published, she like outlined all of it, like where she was, who she was talking to, who she was influenced by, like maybe even what's in her library. And so the thing that got me this last week or so was at the very beginning of the introduction. I'll zoom in a little bit. It says, the first time I was invited to speak on the subject of number knitting at the Brickstore Museum in Kennebunk, Maine, I was introduced to my audience by the charming young assistant director. After a few complimentary remarks, she soared dizzily, and now I am sure that Mrs. Bellamy will tell us all about the history of knitting, and sat down. Now, that got me to thinking, like, you or I, if we were to go to like a yarn shop and hear a teacher that was like the hot new thing, like let's say, I don't know, Stephen West came to the yarn shop and like all the knitters were there and they wanted to hear all about his methods. Do you think, like, would you expect Mr. West to first off give a discussion, a discourse on the history of knitting? No. I wouldn't. I don't think any of us would go to a yarn shop expecting that. And yet that's what her audience expected. And that's how she was introduced. And I thought, like, what? Like, why would she expect that? Hey, Helen. And so I got to thinking about her books, her contemporaries. Okay. So I've got a couple of books here from that same time period. First of all, we're going to touch on Mary Thomas. And the reason I think it's important to touch on Mary Thomas is because she is specifically mentioned in number knitting on page 5. Mary Thomas, whose books on knitting are to my mind the most fascinating that are being written today, tells us that the Egyptians learned knitting from the Arabians, etc., etc. And so what she's saying there is that Virginia had this in her library because this was her favorite knitting book. She told us so. It's the most exciting knitting book being written today. And that bit of context about what she mentions in here for Mary Thomas was at the beginning of the book. So let me show you this Mary Thomas book. All right, so in the beginning of this Mary Thomas book, it's super cute. I love this thing. The first section in the book is history. Like any modern knitting book is not going to start out with the history of knitting. And it goes... Does it have a table of contents? It does. It has history of knitting. It starts on page 1, and it goes down until the next section doesn't start on page 15. And then they're talking about like the history of yarn implements, which is what, and that goes on for like another 14 pages. And so this Mary Thomas book it's different than some of my other knitting books in that it was written by Mary Thomas. She was a knitter. She wasn't a yarn company. She probably got some yarn from, various yarn companies like for a courtesy. I haven't dug through the book to find that out yet, but like she was an independent knitter writing this for other knitters. And so that's distinctly different than a lot of the other vintage knitting books that were, being published at the time. And so Mary Thomas thought it was important enough that knitters know about the history of knitting that she devoted basically like 30 pages to it. Wow. Okay. So this was published in 1938. I think this is like this obviously is not a 1938 cover because, it's not. This Dover edition was published in 72, and it is an unabridged replication of the work originally published in 38. And so in 1938, when this came out, Virginia would have been 48, and because she was born in 1890. She got married in I think 1920. She married her second husband in 26. had some kids. And so by the time this thing came out in 1938, she would have been 48 years old and had 3 young children. So that's where this kind of fits in Virginia's timeline. It was, I think, around, I don't know specifically what year that Virginia got tuberculosis and was sent to the sanitarium. You know what I mean? For like rest and recovery for a while, but it probably was about that time, and that's when she got into knitting. And so 1938 is when this book came out. And so she had, I think at 34, did the Puff Bunny wardrobe, which was published by Women's Home Companion. Lost to history, we can't find it yet, but I'm still working on it. So this was in 38. Now, let's take a look at this other knitting book I acquired recently. This one is called The Complete Book of Progressive Knitting. And the reason this is important is because this was out already by the time that Virginia did any of her work, any of her like follow-up work regarding number knitting in Women's Home Companion or McCall's Needlework and Crafts. So this book, Ida Riley Duncan, it was published in 1940, and this book is distinctly different than the Mary Thomas book. And if you want to get like a really like an in-depth comparison of the two, I would recommend getting both. I should have links down in the description. If I haven't, I'll add them. But like Mary Thomas she was, it's cute. It's got like, it's got clip art and stuff, and it like really encouraged the knitters to like, come up with their own stuff. And it's very approachable with the diagrams and like how to make triangles and how to make shapes, and like here's, interesting, knitting tools. And then there's like, different kinds of like stitches that you can do. It's just it's not like the kind of thing that you need to work like front to back. You could like kind of pick and choose, like, oh, I need to learn how to make a mitten, or I need to learn how to like, I don't know, do a neckline or whatever. It's, it's got a little bit of this, a little bit of that. You can like, pick and choose, which is great. Now this Ida Riley Duncan book was very, very different in that she was a teacher at, let's see where it was, because it says here in the front. She was a teacher in the home economics department, Detroit Public Schools, and then this other person that talked about her was from the adult homemaking department, Detroit Public Schools. So Ida Riley Duncan, she taught, I believe it was dressmaking as well as knitting at the Detroit Public Schools, but she did it from like an academic standpoint, as opposed, or like a technical standpoint, as opposed to just like, things with clip art. Like the Mary Thomas book is brilliant, but this is very different. This is like a technical handbook, and it was aimed at people that were like studying in an academic setting in the school to be like shopkeepers or shop workers at the yarn shops. And so it was aimed at training professionals. And so she was very much of the mindset, like, to train up the professionals and kind of like guard, like the guardian of that knitting knowledge. But what's interesting about this is that she also starts chapter 1 with the history of knitting. And she goes on, I think hers is shorter, it's like 6 pages, but then she's got, the wool chapter has got almost 40 pages of discussion on wool. Everything from combing to worsted weight yarns, the significance of fineness of fiber, dyeing yarns, novelty yarns, virgin wool, pulled wool, reclaimed wool, science of wool. It's very technical, and it's a bit. Mary Thomas's book is a little bit lighter on like the wool section, but knowing that Ida Riley Duncan was like doing this in an academic setting, it makes sense. This is more like a college textbook, really. But what's interesting about this is that if you flip through this book, it's a great book. It really is. It's very, like, this is a typical spread for the book. It's a whole lot of math, and lots of diagrams, probably, I don't know, 100 or more diagrams, but it's all about sweater shaping, garment shaping, tailoring. It's really, really great information. It is really great. And she did a lot of, there's some sketches and things, but for the most part, like all the diagrams are, like that. They're technical instructions for how to build like sleeve caps and, different kinds of necklines and like how to do all the calculations and all that. It's not the kind of book, like if you just wanted to knit a doll sweater for your kid's doll, like you wouldn't go to the Ida Riley Duncan book. Like that would be a little overkill. I mean, maybe some people would, but like if I was a beginner knitter, and I'm fairly advanced, but I look at this book and I'm like, ooh, that's a little too much math for me. So like, if this wouldn't scare off a beginner knitter, I don't know what would. And so, if you wanted to learn more about like the difference between these two approaches, I would encourage you to check out and I should have a link for it in the description. I'm pretty sure I do, but I'll put it there this week. And I've mentioned this before, you need to go check out the Dr. Lily Marsh dissertation. It's like, I don't know, a couple hundred pages long, and it's largely about Elizabeth Zimmerman, but it's how Elizabeth Zimmerman fits into the whole handcraft, arena in the United States in the mid-century. And the official title is Knitting Rebellion, Elizabeth Zimmerman, Identity and Craftsmanship in Post-War America. And both of these two books were published before World War II ended. Virginia's book was published the year the war ended, because the war ended in December 45, I believe. This was published in January of 45. But like they're all kind of in the same time frame. Yes, and so these two books are really, really amazing, and I would encourage you to check both of them out. Okay, so another thing that I thought was interesting about these two books, because Virginia specifically mentions this book in Number Knitting in the introduction. She does not, however, mention this book, but this book would have been out for 5 years by the time she published Number Knitting. But you know what is really interesting is that if we go back over to Number Knitting and we just type in the book's title, there it is. It's not specifically mentioning the book, but she's talking about in the course of her journey. At this point in my progressive knitting, my friend Marjorie Wells MP sent me to Women's Home Companion, where I had the pleasure and profit of selling the idea to Martha Cobb Peabody. So I'm not exactly sure if this progressive knitting book, if that's where she got that word. I'm not sure, because if you look at the timeline, the Puff Bunny wardrobe, which was like the little, snowsuits and like bathing suits and stuff she designed for her kids back in 34, those were sold to Women's Home Companion. And then again, she sold some articles to Women's Home Companion, which I have. I'm going to show them here in just a few minutes. She sold a couple articles, one in 1942, and then she sold another one to Women's Home Companion in 1945. So maybe this book wasn't what she was referring to, but when she had those feelings, but this book was published by the time that she wrote that introduction, which occurred in 1945. So I'm kind of thinking, I could be wrong. I don't know if it was in her library, but I would garner to say that Virginia knew about this book. Because if you read through the introduction, there's kind of like this tension between the how Virginia felt about like the shopkeepers and like the yarn professionals, and like how she just wanted to knit. And Mary Thomas was more like, you can do it, you can design your own stuff and you can do it. And Ida Riley Duncan was like, okay, if you want to make the sleeve cap just so and have everything just so, like here's the math that you need to do it just so. And they're like two very different approaches. And Virginia, as she says, cited much more on the side of Mary Thomas with like her, I guess it's a little more free-flowing. I mean, Mary Thomas was very, very skilled. She knew her stuff, but I feel like there was more, the Mary Thomas book had more of like a feeling of independent spirit, because this to me doesn't really scream independent spirit. This is algebra. Yeah. I mean, maybe this would be like the ultimate freedom to some people, but to me, that's like, this is too much for me. Like this, following patterns like this, it's not enjoyable knitting for me, for my style. So I'm sure there's, thousands of women around the world and men that love that, but, I just want to knit garter stitch squares. Okay, so enough about that. All right. There actually is one more thing about that. Another reason I think this particular book may have been, and like why I think both of these books were like influences on her, besides the fact that they both have like history of knitting, whole chapters about that, is if you look at this section in the Complete Book of Progressive Knitting, there's a second, let's see, where is it? In the wool chapter, it says, when one speaks of wool as losing its life, one means that the elasticity, the resiliency, and felting qualities, I don't know what that, have been taken away through careless handling or washing. One should remember that wool, like a living thing, should be treated carefully. It is this life, in quotes, and elasticity that allow wool clothing to resist wrinkling, etc., etc. Okay, so if we go back up, whoop, not there. Hold on. Okay, if we go back over here to the number knitting book again, if we, I think, do a search for, on page 12, I believe. I think so. On page 12, in the introduction, she has very similar text. She says, the disadvantage of knitting tightly are obvious. Wool is a beautiful and alive medium. The knitter's hands should feel the wool on the counter, instinctively testing its elasticity and lightness by touch. She may not know it, but she is looking for that live yarn, live quality in her yarn. Now the same live yarn under a microscope reveals the delicate and exquisite mechanism of a strand of yarn. It resembles the hinges of the spinal column. And so it's got Virginia's like writing all about the qualities of wool. It feels very, very familiar, to this progressive knitting discussion about the live quality of wool. And so I gotta think this was in her library. I could be wrong, but the timeline is right, and the information presented in here seems like it could very well have influenced Virginia's work. But Virginia, she wanted to be independent, and so I don't know that she would have necessarily promoted the type of book like this. So, all right, so those are the two knitting books for today that I wanted to share with you. Hey, Rose, welcome. Oh, also one other thing that I found in this book, this is precious, inside this Ida Riley Duncan book, is this little postcard. This is from Bullfrog Rock, Ringing Rocks Park, Pottstown, Pennsylvania. And these people look like they're from about the 1890s, maybe, in their dress, maybe 1900. And it's a postcard. It's dated May, I think it says May 15th, 1946. And it says, "This is a space in one of our park over here." And it's to Mr. H.E. Liu in St. Esberth, Pennsylvania. I just thought that was neat, that whoever sold me this book decided that it was important to include the postcard that came along inside of it. So there you go. Oh, yes, Rose, I did get your response on Ravelry, but I'm sorry I hadn't responded yet. I did. I've been racking my brain about that winged blouse, and I'm so close to finishing it. But yeah, I'm going to show you that later, because I know we've been doing the knit along for the Hampton sweater, but in my travels, as the sweater kept getting like bigger and bigger, I needed something that like would fit in a carry-on. And so I grabbed some lace weight yarn and I cast on another sweater. And I'm almost done, and it's called the winged blouse, and I'm going to show you that later. And it's a doozy. I keep thinking I've seen all the different ways that Virginia can knit a sweater, because normally modern knitters go like top down or bottom up, or like if they're really, really wild, they'll go sleeve to sleeve. But Virginia was like not at all concerned about, limiting herself. And so literally every sweater is knit in a new direction. It's crazy. Okay, next up. Oh, all right, this is great. Women's Home Companion. So I had talked about this a little bit ago, in that I think I showed this book. I showed this book last time, and you guys, you need to get this book. This is incredible. And so you understand, like, this is not a knitting book. This is not a knitting history book. This is a fashion history book. And what's so cool about this is that it was published, so you understand, like, kind of like where the angle is that the authors are coming from. This is published by Bloomsbury Academic, an imprint of Bloomsbury Publishing Place. I guess that's what that says. But anyway, if you look at all the contributors, they're almost without exception, they're college professors in the fashion department, and like some of them are also museum curators, and they're not the kinds of people that are like pushing out new patterns on Ravelry at all, because they're like academic folks and they have this other thing, and a lot of them probably aren't even knitters, and that's fine. But like these are all PhD type people. Okay, so with that in mind, the chapter Virginia, I think, is the second chapter in here, and it's a great book, great read. I learned some new things in here. But see my fancy bookmarks? It's toilet paper. Anyway, the reason I was able to track down these Women's Home Companion books, magazines, is because of this bibliography right here. And so each one of the sections in, like, each one of the chapters in this book features like a different famous designer in America, and Virginia has her own chapter. And so they outlined all the different places. I guess these are endnotes or footnotes. I guess they're endnotes. I didn't get far enough in in college English class to really know the difference. I guess footnotes would be down at the bottom, whatever. But anyway, so I went through and I made sure, like, if there was a magazine listed in here, I went and made sure I got a copy of it. And so that's why I knew to get a copy of these Women's Home Companions magazines. Yeah. Okay, so let's, we need the bigger camera, don't we? Let's go there. This other stuff off the table. Okay. Women's Home Companion, 1942. And so 1942 was still during the war. World War II was like still very active. And so this is like got a whole lot of patriotic wartime, go America, just very Americana kinds of stuff in it. And it's great. It's a great book. Did I show you all this a couple of weeks ago? Because I've had this for a couple of weeks, and I don't remember if I've showed it to you, because I was kind of on a magazine buying spree there for a few months. I think I've gotten almost all that I want to get now, so that's great. But here's what is so great about this this magazine. First of all, I want to show you this. This really struck my eye, and the reason is because of the way that she's wearing that shawl. Now, who is this? This is Ginger Rogers. And nowadays, people don't wear shawls like that, like over their head. But back in the day, I guess that was a thing. And to modern eyes, it might look a little goofy, but it probably wouldn't have looked goofy to them. And so if I had showed this off a few weeks ago, this is the butterfly shawl out of the book, and it looked goofy in the book, and I thought, like, why would anyone wear a shawl like that? But then, if you look at Miss Rogers here, that's exactly what she was doing. And so she was like high fashion, Hollywood star. And so that kind of a fashion influence made its way into Virginia's book. And once I saw this picture, I was like, wow, Virginia was like, she was high fashion. She was coming up with knitted versions of like all the latest, coolest, most attractive fashion out there. Okay, so let's go back to the reason that finding this was just like an extra bonus. The reason I bought this magazine was because of this article. Not the green beans, but this one. It's called "Look, Mother, I Can Knit. Anybody who can knit a square can make a doll's clothes," says Virginia Bellamy, who dressed a pair of twins to prove it. And when I read that, I thought, oh, she had twins? No, these are the twins, the little dolls. And so she goes into a whole description about how you can, use different squares to make the baby jacket and the baby shoes and all the baby things, and how you can come up with your own, what she called a box number, and some of these same ideas about dressing a baby. Let me find it in the book. Dressing a baby just based on squares. It's in the book here. It's different patterns, but like the essence is the same. How to draw and knit a custom-made square. And she has you knit like little panties, and there's a little top thing and a little jacket. And it goes on for several pages, I don't know, 5 or 6 pages. How to make the baby shirt and the baby panties and the baby jacket. And then also this little fireman's hat thing. And it's all based on squares. Oh, and there's a baby crib coat. Yeah, and it's very cute, but like that idea that she was presenting in this article here, it made its way into the book. And incidentally, this was in 42. The book wasn't published until 45. So this is a few years before. And I've kind of wondered, this little girl here, I wonder if that's Jane, her daughter, because I believe Jane was born in 31, I believe. I think she was born in 31. And this was published in 42. The picture probably was taken, what was this? This was December 42. So this, like, does this look like a 9-year-old girl to you? If it is, that could be Jane. It might be. I'm not sure. She looks like she could be, I don't know, 7, 8, or 9. Anyway, yeah. And just like in the McCall's Needlework magazine, like, they don't actually publish the pattern in here. They just tell you to send in 6 cents to this address, and then they'll send you the leaflet. And I kind of wonder, like, I mean, now nothing is sold for 6 cents. Like, if you see, 6 cents on the ground, you, like, don't even bother to pick it up because it's like a nickel and a penny and it's filthy, right? But, like, if you wanted to buy something for 6 cents in 1942, like, how do you do that? Do you mail them a check? Do you mail them a nickel and a penny? Like, what's the postage on that? I don't know. What do you guys think? Like, how would you pay for something for 6 cents in 1942? Incidentally, I think this Women's Home Companion magazines were, I think they were cheaper. Like, the leaflets, I think they were cheaper than the ones in the McCall's Needlework. Because I thought in the McCall's Needlework magazine, they were like 10 cents or 25 cents. Let's see if I can find it real quick. It's a coupon on page 37. Here we go. So this is McCall's Needlework magazine. Oh, interesting. So this Women's Home Companion was 42. This is 1946. So it's just 4 years later. This pattern for the baby things was 6 cents. But to get this one from Women's Home Companion, it was a whopping 25 cents. It was 4 times the price. That's pretty crazy. Huh. Wow. I mean, I have one of the pamphlets from, I think I have number knitting pamphlet number 1 that I got from a library. And it was, I think it was like 8 pages. So maybe the one from Women's Home Companion was like not as big and wasn't expensive to produce, and that's why it was cheaper? I don't know. Rose says postage wasn't always based on a weight. Oh, interesting. Because I have seen in some of these magazines where they tell you to send in your, I don't know, 25 cents or whatever, and then you send in a self-addressed stamped envelope. But, like, how would you know how much postage to put on it? Because, like, how big is the thing that you're getting? I don't know. Oh my gosh, that's a whole nother rabbit trail I'm going to have to go down. Oh, good gracious. And then Anita says, do you pay the post office when you order and the post office gives the money to the receiver in the other end? Oh, I have seen that. Pay the post office when you order. So it's sort of like a reverse COD, cash on delivery. So I used to work for a company that did that. Like, they would take out advertisements in the paper and people would, buy the thing. It was like a booklet or instructional booklet or something. But this was like 30 years ago almost. So it's kind of like before e-commerce and like online shopping and all that. And so what the people would do is they would fill out the form, and then they would they would call up and they would leave their name and address and phone number on an answering machine, and then some transcription service would transcribe it and fax it over to us or send it to us on it would come out on a dot matrix printer, and we'd print out the shipping labels. We'd put them on the booklet that we were shipping out, and we'd drop all the booklets at the post office. And then the postman would go there, knock on the person's door, tuck, 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 And he'd say, all right, that'll be $30 or whatever it was. And some people, they would just refuse it. But some people, they would send in checks. But I also remember the postman, like they would pay him, and then the post office would send us a money order. And so we just get like, you know, thousands of dollars worth of money orders every day. It wasn't my company. The sad thing was that was an unsavory company, and they targeted poor people in the hood. And so like if nowadays, like a postman going into the hood, like rapping on people's doors, like, all right, you know, here's the thing that you ordered. That'll be $30, please. Like, can I get shot? I don't know. Ooh. Okay. So Maura says, you sent the change in an envelope, sometimes with the self-addressed stamped envelope. And Rose says it was standard. If it was a standard envelope, it would hold up to 6 sheets of paper for regular postage. Oh, that's interesting. Because I remember reading about, I think it was around the same time, maybe, yeah, probably in the 40s, like when polio was a really, like still a big deal in the country. It was when the March of Dimes was kind of like initiated. And I don't know if you know this about the March of Dimes, but maybe they've changed their like mission, but it used to be like for the research and treatment of polio and polio patients. And so like, you know, when the polio epidemic like broke out in the 40s and 50s in America, then there was like this nationwide campaign, okay, everybody, you know, the March of Dimes, like moms and grandmas, they literally marched down the street and they would collect dimes from the neighbors. And you know what they would do? I think they mailed them to the White House. like the president will know what to do with all of our dimes. The march, literally a March of Dimes. Fortunately, it was privatized. so I don't think neighbors would be like, you know, they wouldn't be very happy now if we marched up and down the street asking for money that we could mail into the federal government. Anyway, but I wondered, okay, if you got like a bucket of dimes from all of your neighbors and you're supposed to mail them to the White House, like how much does that weigh? Like how much does that cost in postage to mail all the dimes to the White House? Okay, Rose says, my postman conceals carry. Smart man. Not in a great area. Oh, yes, Roosevelt helped start that. That makes sense, you know, because President Roosevelt, he had polio. And so that makes sense that he would have been part of the effort to start that. So that would have been in the 30s, because he was president for 12 years, I think, 30s, 40s. You guys are awesome. So many great things we're learning together. Okay, where were we? We're talking about knitting. Oh my gosh. And I was worried I wouldn't have anything to talk about today. Whew. Okay, June 1945, Women's Home Companion. This is great. Okay, so June, I forgot to put that bookmark back. June 1945, World War II is still going strong. And so this is the bridal issue. Just, you know, June is always the season for brides. It was then, it is now. And so there's like this whole letter on here. I think I don't know who it's signed by. William Leahy, if I can read this. Dwight Eisenhower? Yeah, I think that's Dwight D. Eisenhower, C.W. Nimitz. So these were like the big generals, and like, because Dwight Eisenhower, he wasn't president yet, he was a general. And so they wrote this little article and put it out like on the front page of the Women's Home Companion, and they signed it. So you're like, oh, that makes more sense, Maura. People would convert the dimes to dollar bills and mail them. That makes way more sense. Like, jeez, I'm an idiot. Okay. Thanks for that. Okay, so this is like a whole patriotic theme. I don't know if any of you have been to a military wedding, where the man, well, I'm sure maybe, I don't know that a woman in the military would dress up in her like dress whites to get married. But I know guys do, because I've been to one of those weddings, and they do that with the swords. And then I remember when they were coming out of the church, they the guys were there with their swords, and they whoosh in front of the bride and groom as they were coming out, and everyone was like, whoa. Anyway, okay, so military themed wedding. 1945. I love these old magazines. You know, what's interesting is that I feel like ladies' magazines, like the graphic design has changed, but the content I don't feel has changed very much. Oh my gosh, look, it's a young Joe Biden. Your hair smells so good. Anyway, but like I don't feel like the magazines have changed that much. You know, they're concerned about like taking care of baby skin, and they're concerned about, you know, like cleanliness and having nice hair and like, you know, the best foods to feed your family. There's surprisingly a lot of advertisements in here for soap. And I kind of wonder if that had to kind of play into like the whole polio thing that we were just talking about, because like the 1940s and 50s, like people were really like, all these new household cleaning products came out, and so like it was a big deal. And the polio epidemic hit the people in like the more like the not poor community. So if you were like middle class and up, you got hit harder because your kids like weren't outside playing in the filthy dirt, like getting inoculated with all the nasty germs. And so the cleaner kids actually got polio at a higher rate. And I kind of wonder if that's partly due to the fact that there was so many soap advertisements directed toward the women. Okay, so great. I think I might have removed my bookmark because, you know, that's what I do. Okay, I am... they had a whole lot of like fictional love stories. I guess they'd call, what do they call them? Like romance novels or romance stories. A lot of that in these magazines. And I, of course, moved the bookmark. Okay, all right, here's something that's really funny. And I know this isn't about knitting, but I'm dating myself here. So I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and I'm middle-aged now. I am solidly middle-aged. And so when I'm out and about, I see teenage girls and girls in their 20s. They're not necessarily at the beach, but they have on the short shorts that are so short you can't even see that they have any pants on. And they've got these long shirts on. That's not a dress, it's a shirt, but it's long enough to cover up the short shorts. And so they're just walking down the street and you're not sure if they're wearing any pants. And look, they were doing that back in the 40s. It's, my goodness. Love it. All right, so let's see. I think I made notes about where this is. Oh, it's on page 55. Okay. Oh, look, it's another soap advertisement. Good gracious. Jell-O pudding. Almost there. 55. Oh, nope. Page 70. 72. That's where it is. Okay, this is what I wanted to show you. This is the number knitting article. That's why I bought this magazine. This is called, it's short, it's one paragraph long. It's entitled Knitting News by Florence R. Casey, designed by Virginia Woods Bellamy, patent applied for. She applied in it was either 1945 or 1944. And again, this one is 6 cents. We call this new form of knitting number knitting. You need only a chart as your guide to make this pretty carriage robe, 24 by 30 inches. Follow the units on the chart numerically and work in plain knit stitch. These units knitted on different angles prevent the robe from stretching out of shape, also an asset when laundering. The robe is double, one side white and the other side pastel shades, tufted together with matching wools. So what really was interesting to me about this, let me see if I can find this in the book real quick. Carriage robe. Yeah, here it is. So this is that same blanket. And it's called patchwork blanket. First number knit blanket. And this picture is courtesy of Women's Home Companion. And you can't, even in my hard copy of the book, you can't see the detail. Like, I could tell that there's these little tufty things, and I can tell that it's mitered square, but like squares, but that's it. You can't really see much in the way of detail. But if you look, I'm going to see if I can make this light just a little bit better. Oh, okay. I'll brighten that up next time so you can see this more without it getting blown out. What's interesting about this is that the units are colored for one thing, and the little squiggly lines represent the garter stitch, and usually in her charts she didn't do that. Also, here you've got the divided triangle or divided squares, and they're worked kind of like in the ski track fashion. But here's where I thought was really interesting. The border of this thing is made up of, assuming that the drawing here is representative of what was actually knit, and it's hard to tell, but assuming that's the case, then this border is made up of triangles, not divided triangles, just regular triangles. And so like here you would have cast on and decreased on one side, and then, but they're not just like regular 45-degree angles. Like some of them are, like this one is, this little gray one, but then like this second gray one, it's like kind of like an isosceles triangle, like the angles are different. And I can't, maybe that's how she got the rounded corner. I'm not entirely sure, because that rounded corner right there, it's a triangle. And so I'm wondering if you knit a triangle like that onto two triangles at another angle, if it just, by the nature of the stretch, it's going to curve around. I kind of think that's what might be happening. I tried charting this, and that just like, it was a hot mess, because like in my charting, I want to do the grid like on the graph paper, because that makes the charting easier. But like if the shapes that you're knitting, they're just naturally going to adapt, and sometimes you can make them do things that the graph paper does not allow you to do, if that makes sense, because graph paper is flat, it's two-dimensional, but like the knitting, it's just gonna adapt itself. Like, oh, you want me to bend a little bit this way? That's fine. I'll make it a rounded corner. That's kind of what I'm thinking. So anyway, this little knitting news, that's why I got this article. Yeah. And there's so much great stuff in here. Oh my gosh. Oleomargarine. Another thing that I found is interesting in these, Rose had one more thing about this. Did I just lose my page? Rose said the second gray looks like it's 90 degrees on the outside instead of the inside. Yeah, it does. That was another reason I was having problems charting it, because like it keeps changing. Like this gray it's leaning that away. And the second one, it's like, Virginia said, you can't join a flat edge to a bias edge without a pucker. And yet, that's exactly what she did here. So, yeah, I think I'm just going to have to, knit it and like just see if it works. Yeah. Okay, so another thing I noticed about these magazines in this time period, in addition to like the ridiculous amount of soap advertisements, soap and baby formula, there's a lot of advertisements for pantyhose, a lot. And we've talked about that a little bit in previous weeks about like when nylon was invented and like the nylon shortage and how women would like draw the line on the back of their legs to do the nylons. And like for decades, like nylons in the workforce was like, it was mandatory. And apparently, I think that was even true like back in the 70s and 80s in a lot of places. But so hosiery was a very big deal. And they marketed it very heavily because the silk stockings that they made before the introduction of nylons, they were like thicker and they didn't stretch, and so the nylon was like amazing, and people loved it. And so I wanted to show you some other another magazine that has a lot of hosiery advertisements, and the only reason I found out about this was because I was on the archives.org. And you can do like a search for, Virginia Woods Bellamy, number knitting. Like you can search the metadata, you can search the text contents, the title, the author. Like there's all different ways to search for interesting documents in the archives, archive.org. And so I was experimenting with some different like combinations. And you guys, I found another number knitting like mention from this time period that's not listed anywhere. It's like, it's not listed in this book. I found one that they didn't find. Oh my gosh. And it's in the craziest place. It's not in, and Virginia doesn't even mention it. So maybe she didn't even know. You guys, check out where number knitting was mentioned. The RN magazine. 1953. This is a nurse magazine. It's for registered nurses. And no joke, this is where I found the mention of number knitting. And oh my gosh, this magazine, this is just wild. It's 100 pages, and it has a lot of advertisements. Interestingly, the same things that I think nurses are probably concerned with now, like comfortable clothes, comfortable uniforms, and hand cream. Those are like the main advertisers in this thing. And of course, baby formula. Of course, because, everybody was advertising baby formula, baby lotion. I think I'm guessing, like the main function of nurses back then was like maternity, because there was a big baby boom. But also there's, in this article, in this magazine, there's an article that says, if the amount of women nurses, because I don't think there was men nurses back in the day, the amount of nurses that they needed to like fill the demands, they needed 1 in 10 girls graduating high school to enter the nursing field. Like, that's a lot. That's a lot of nurses. And I think a lot of the job of nurses was like maternity and baby care. Because this is an RN magazine, and like there's a whole lot of different types of RNs now. Like you've got the ER nurses, and you've got the surgical nurses, and you've got pediatric nurses, and you've got like, the nurses that work at the VA. Like there's a bazillion types of nurses. But like this magazine is almost exclusively focused on babies. Okay, so let's go, and we're just gonna flip through this a little bit. It's baby stuff, Q-tips, okay, love that. Deodorant, that's important. Clothing, it's a great read. Gelatin? Why were they advertising gelatin? Oh, for fingernails. Of course, because in the last magazine we looked at, they actually had a Jell-O advertisement for like, you can serve Jell-O for dinner. All right. So I'm going to just flip it open to the bookmarks because I bookmarked it. And we're going to fast forward to page 51. So this is a nursing magazine, right? And they're advertising, what was right before this? Holding on to your faith. Okay, information about drugs. That's nursing type stuff. Page 51, fashion. And what the best prints are, and like how much they cost, and who the designers are. Do you think this would make its way into a modern nursing magazine? The pharmaceutical information, yes. Baby formula, yes. What type of handbag to wear, to use? No. I don't think. I'm not a nurse. I don't read nursing magazines, but I'm pretty sure you wouldn't have this kind of stuff show up in a modern nursing magazine. I love it. So where does Virginia fit in here? So what they were doing in this this magazine article, they were talking about different designers, like the sizes or half sizes they came in, the colors came in, and what the prices were, different fashions of the day. And then where you can get them. And okay, here we go. Never before seen. Da 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 da. This is Virginia's book. So what they did is they took oh my gosh, I'm wearing this sweater. This black sweater is called Hampton sweater, and this white sweater is called the Diamond Design sweater. And they took those two sweaters. And this is a really great graphic design because this black sweater is on a blonde, this white sweater is on a brunette, and they're flipped, and it's the Queen of Hearts. The lacy black and white sweaters can even be knit by RNs who think that art's beyond them. You learn from Crown's number knitting book, $3.95, to make 7 simple basic forms: square, triangle, divided square and triangle, rectangle, wing, double wing. Then combine them as you please. It takes little time. Yarn yields always stretch that you needn't block. The end. That is Virginia's spread. And the rest of this stuff is talking about the pearls. I'm guessing maybe they're fake for $2.50. I don't know. I could be wrong. Maybe you could get real pearls for $2.50 back in 1952. And again, more hosiery advertisements. Which I think is interesting. Another reason I think that the previous researchers missed this is because if you just do a search in the archives for Virginia Bellamy, Virginia Woods Bellamy, this doesn't come up because her name is not in here at all. And so what really kind of got me thinking about how she fit in. She was a knitter, yes. She was an artist. She was an independent thinker. That's why she liked the Mary Thomas book so much better than the Ida Riley Duncan book. But where her stuff was so trendy, so modern for the day, that she was viewed by non-knitters. There's probably a lot of RNs that did knit, but this isn't a knitting magazine. And so she was referenced in the general population as oh, this is the person that you can learn how to knit awesome sweaters from. That's crazy. If you think about modern day knitting books, outside of the knitting community, people generally aren't going to know about them. And certainly in other industries, probably no one is going to promote a knitting book to the masses, right? But this knitting magazine thought that her book was worthwhile and so important enough that it made its way into the high fashion design scene of the 50s. So that was a spectacular find. Okay, pantyhose was first available in the mid-60s. Yes. it got better in the 80s. Before that, women wore stockings with girdles or garter belts. Yes. Hand washing habitually is hard on the skin. Oh, that makes sense. If you're a nurse, you're going to wash your hands a lot. There was my yarn shop owner, like back in the 90s or the early 2000s, when I actually had like a local, like I had a local yarn shop that like was my place to go. She sold her favorite lotion. It was like called Second Skin or something, and it would like not wash off. And it would protect your skin, and that's what she sold for like her lotion of choice at the yarn shop. Mishibi says, my mom began her nursing career in 58. She was a woman who happened to be a nurse, so it was frustrating. I imagine it would be to always have dry skin, hence the need for the hand lotion. That makes sense. Okay, so the sweater in the book that we just looked at, 5. There we go. So this sweater here, this is the Hampton sweater, right? Whew. Look, I'm wearing the Hampton sweater, and it fits just like in the book. I don't know how to pose like a 1940s lady though. They really like to do the, have their shoulders down and like lots of arm like triangles. I need to work on that. Maybe if I had a photographer to work with me. But anyway, so we've been doing the knit along for Hampton sweater, and I got the most amazing box of goodies. So Stephanie, she helped me work on the Hampton cardigan, which we found a picture in the magazine. I redrew the chart. I sent it to her. She did it, and like we kept going back and forth. Hampton cardigan. We recreated it like from the picture, and it's amazing. I'm going to show you that in a couple of weeks. But so she sent me a box of sweaters that she had knit for me to show off and examine and like see the details. And there's several of them, and each week I'm going to show off one. And this week I'm showing you the Hampton. This is the Hampton sweater in the book. And I have one, mine is like, I think it's green on the front and purple on the back, or vice versa. It fits the same. This is a lace weight yarn, and it's knit on like 6 different sizes of needles. And it's lovely. It's got this cute little, a little button in the back at the neckline. And it fits fabulous. Like most modern sweaters, they don't fit this great. I mean, a lot of sweaters are like rectangles and they're sagging and bagging. Not flattering. Not for my taste. But like this one, because of the modular squares, and you can't really see it that well. Like I kind of wish it was a little more see-through just for the purposes of showing it off. Can you see it now? There you go. You can see all the diagonal lines where the decreases are and where the units join. Yeah. So I'm gonna, once I'm done showing you all these sweaters, I'm gonna box them up very carefully and send them back to Stephanie. So thanks, Stephanie, for this. This sweater it's fabulous. It fits, it's perfect. I love it. Yes. Okay, since we've been talking about finishing projects, I want to show you, I'm going to show you my Hampton sweater that I'm working on, because I'm still working on it. Our knit along is going until end of the month, and if you haven't started yours yet, I mean, I suppose if you're a fast knitter, you still could. You could still, start the sweater and like finish it, and like in time to be eligible for prizes in the end of the month. But if not, that's okay. If you haven't seen it yet, the Hampton sweater is on page 238 and 239. Like if you're new here, you might not know this. If you've been here before, there's a mistake in the book. The chart here does not match this. So this says it's for a man. Where's the picture? There you go. This is Hampton sweater. It's on a guy. It says for chest 42. Make this a little bit bigger. And this says, your box number is 4 stitches and 4 ridges. and you're going to cast on 16 stitches. But if you go over here to the chart and your box number is 4, that's 4, 8, 12. And so if you knit according to the chart, you will end up with a size 36 sweater, which fits a woman. I mean, it fits this woman. It might not fit all women, but it fit me. So just so you know, the chart is 1 square off. So I should have links down in below to the new chart that I drew, and the stitch calculator on the website, where you can like plug in your own gauge and your own bust measurement, desired bust measurement, and it'll tell you how many stitches to cast on for each square. So if you're new here, you can do that. But that's what our knit along is for May, June, July that we've been working on. You know, since we're still talking about Hampton, I'll just show you where I'm at with mine. And I don't remember, honestly, because it's been a couple of weeks, I don't remember how far along I was the last time that we were all together. But I'll show you where I'm at now. So this is my hand spun alpaca cormo yarn, Scrumptious. And you may remember that even though I developed the stitch calculator, when I calculated my own sweater, I was tired. And so I calculated it like to fit an 8-year-old. It's too small. I think I did like a 16 by 16 for each square. I should have done like a 23 or 25 for each square, but like, whatever. It works. I like my sweaters tight, and no joke, this thing totally stretches, so it's gonna look hot. Yeah, so in what I did is a lot of Virginia's patterns, she has you decrease your needle size as you go down to the sleeve. That makes the gauge, it makes the fabric down here more dense, and it just makes the sleeves a little bit more bell-shaped. I like it more fitted, and so what I did is I decreased the stitch count, 1 stitch per row of divided squares going down. So these were all 16, and so for my sleeves I did 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10. And I'm like halfway done with the second sleeve. So 15, 14, 13. Yeah, so this should be 12. Yeah, this should be 12 stitches per square. And so, you know, another hour so I could have that finished. And then I'm going to add some ribbing and some extra detailing up here on the neckline. If you look at the pictures of some of the sweaters in Ravelry, you can see that some of our number knitters, they had added like a little extra little wedge right in there, which is really spectacular. I think that's going to make it fit better. And so I'm going to figure out how to do that as well. Rose, you're so funny. Some of us don't need to show off all the curves we have. I get it. That's why you can use the stitch calculator to plug in your gauge and your measurement. If like you want extra ease, use a bigger number. It's your sweater. You can make it however loose that you want. Yeah. Okay, so that's Hampton sweater. I love it. 713. All right. So, oh, here it is. Do you guys remember? This was a couple months ago now when I was working on Copper Cardigan. So let me show you the picture in the book. Copper Cardigan. Where is it? There we go. Oh, hold on. Okay, here's Copper Cardigan. And it's a petite, she's a petite little model. I wonder if that's Jane. That kind of looks like the girl in the picture of the Women's Home Companion we were looking at earlier. Maybe someday I'll find out. I don't know. But it says that it used like, I don't know, 6 ounces of yarn or something. And so like a dummy, I bought 6 ounces, and then it turns out, no, it says 9, but buy 10 for safety. And I was like, all right, I got 10. I think I ended up using like, I don't know, 22 ounces of yarn or something on this. It's ridiculous. And what we found when we meaning me, when I knit this thing, is that by doing these gussets, it made the whole thing like super baggy. So if you add an extra gusset under the arm, that's effectively adding like, I don't know, like an extra 4 or 8 inches of ease around the bust, which if you're super busty and you need that, well, that's great. That's, you know, you could make a smaller size, just add some gussets and there you go. You know, you got room. But like I had kind of like already accounted for the measurement of the size without the gusset. And so when I put the gusset in, it was like I was wearing a potato sack. And it's too big. It's way too big. It's ridiculous. But anyway, so I was a little discouraged. But so what I did is Stephanie came to the rescue. Stephanie is in California, and she and I worked together to do to redo the Hampton cardigan, like from a picture. And so I'd send her a chart, like, and she just go for it. And she like made a sweater, but then added like all this amazing detailing. And so I was like, hey, Stephanie, you know, do you have any tips for me? Because I'm not like I'm really good at knitting mitered squares, but like doing buttons and like all the little extra details, that's like not my thing. And so she's like, yeah, I'll weave in the ends and like, you know, I'll undo the gussets, or, you know, so she did. So I mailed it to her a few weeks ago. And so here's what Stephanie did. Stephanie took out the gusset, and no joke, the gusset went from here to here. And so the sweater was like, it was ridiculously huge. So she, like a brave soul, braver than me, she took out the gusset, and then she, you know, seamed it closed here. And so now this armhole depth is appropriate. I think it's like, let me get my, what is it now? Armhole depth. It's 8 inches. That's appropriate. Because before we took out the gusset, the armhole depth would have been about 13.5 inches, which is really big. It's really big. So she took out the gusset. She added these lovely little like cuff links here, and these she told me they're removable. So like this cuff is like sewn back. This is a double layer here on the cuff, and she said the cuff links are removable, and so it's just like a little button that you can pop out. I don't know why you'd ever want to, but the cuff links are nice because like the cuff itself would have been like too big otherwise, and it would just be like a big bell sleeve. But by putting the cuff link there, as opposed to like I would have put it here, you know, because I guess I don't know any better, but like she did a better job, and she put it like right here, and so it makes the sleeve fit better. And I think if you look at the original picture, I think that's what they did there too. They like put the cuff link to kind of tighten it up around the cuff a bit. I still don't know about those gussets. Because I can't see gussets on her, and the sweater looks okay. So I don't know, maybe the gussets are optional. I don't know. But another thing that Stephanie did is she added these little, she made like a gazillion yards of I-cord. Here we go. Camera 3. Oh, we'll do camera 2. That way you can see the detail better. Okay, so you've got like all this I-cord, and she made these little I-cord knot things, and these little like I-cord things here. I don't know what those are called. They're like just really great details, and then like stitched it all together. And so she's got 1, 2, 3, 4. How many of these do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 of these things. So that's like a lot of hours of knitting I-cord. And then on this side, she's got like, I think these are called, what are these called? Like Chinese knots or something? Is that what they're called? I think they're called Chinese knots. I'm not entirely sure. But then like they go into like this little, to me these kind of look Celtic, right? They go into this little like Celtic cable-y detail-y thing, which is amazing. And it's like all stitched down and perfect. And it looks like, this is, I think, worsted weight yarn. The whole time I was working on this project, I had like tried to convince myself this was fingering and it would be fine. And then and it's alpaca. And then when I kept running out of yarn, I like slowly, I came to admit to myself, like, that's worsted weight. That's not fingering. Oh, and by the way, it's alpaca. Like, oh my gosh. Hard-headed. Okay, so she did these like Celtic knot things. And in each one of the little knots, it's like she saved some of the little sparkly yarn, because the whole sweater is knit with this alpaca blend. I think it's like 80% alpaca or something, 20% wool, I think. And then, but on the like the cuffs and the front and the border down the front and like around the neckline and the waistband, there was like this strand of sparkly copper colored sequiny stuff. And so she made these little bitty like knot things to go doop, right there, which is, I love that. And then she, in matching yarn, made like this little, to me this feels like cotton or maybe like a cotton wool blend. You see that? These little like knot holder things to go over the knot, which is, again, it's great. And you know, because this isn't just for, it's not just for like for looks, like this is actually super functional. So at the top, hey Ash, you're new. Welcome. Oh, you've never heard of this book. Oh, hun, you are in for a treat. Welcome to the vortex. Okay, so she also added on the top, on the inside, she added these extra little buttons on the top, I think the top 2. Yeah, so there's like button here and then a little button loop thing, and she got 2 of those. And so the detail that she put in on this is just like, good gracious, that's incredible. I think she told me she's doing TKGA courses. I don't know if it's the Master Hand Knitter or what, but she has been doing some TKGA stuff, and she's like studying to be a knitwear designer, and it's like, well, yeah, of course, that makes perfect sense. And so like that's right, I should totally put it on. Why? Because sweaters are for wearing. Yes. Yes. So keep in mind, like, it's big on me, and that is my own fault, because I learned so much. I could totally make this again, and I would make some adjustments to it to make it fit me. As it stands right now, hold on, come on, eyeballs, work with me. It would fit someone better that is, okay. Oh, all right. Another detail I got to show you real quick. So these little buttons here, this is incredible. These little cute buttons, they're on the front and they're on the back for like the interior buttons. And I didn't notice that until just now when I tried to unbutton them. So when you button it, you got to be sure to put it like on the right side. Okay, so this would fit someone better who is, gauge swatch, the story of my life. I should make myself a t-shirt that says I should gauge swatch, or like put myself a sticker in the mirror or something to remind myself every day. Okay, so this would fit someone better who is, for one thing, taller than me, maybe a little bit bigger around, and lives in a northern climate, because I live in the south. And most of the year it's hot, like really hot. And even when it's cold, like on a bad day, it's in the 40s. So like, I don't know when I'm ever going to need a 2-pound alpaca sweater. 2 pounds? Almost 2 pounds. There we go. That being said, it will fit someone with longer arms better. All right, I'm not going to do the interior buttons. I'll just do the, the buttons are like kind of over a little bit. Making sure I get, is that right? Obviously, I've never buttoned this thing up before. I'll start at the bottom. There we go. You live in Minnesota. It gets colder there. My first year of college was in Minnesota, and I had come from San Diego, and I moved to Minneapolis for the year. And, well, then I went back to San Diego. But since that experience, I've never needed a sweater to keep me warm in the Arctic. I'm so hot. Okay, here you go. Did I do it right? Oh, I missed one. I missed 5. Oh, goodness. This would be easier with a mirror. Like, I feel, when you were a kid, like, I don't know, junior high school or whatever, did you ever try to, like, button yourself up and you didn't check before you left the house and you realized you were walking around school all day, like, with one button off and, like, nobody told you? Oh, my gosh. Again, I should have a mirror, and I think I did it right. There we go. Okay. Oh, there it is. All right. Okay. Here. So this is the sweater. It fits better. It's big. Well, if my arms were like 6 inches longer, it would fit even better. But like it's roomy enough that I could wear like a whole other sweater under this. And it would still have, so it's like an outerwear sweater. Your feet are frozen to the ground. It's June. Yeah, so there, this is Copper Cardigan. I love it. It's so hot. It is so hot. Oh my gosh. But it's stunning. It is stunning. I'm so happy with the way it turned out. Love it. Okay. Oh gosh. So we are at 7. It's almost 7:30. No, Siri, I wasn't talking to you. I have another sweater I've been working on, but it's not, and I haven't shared it with you all yet because I've been having some issues. What I'm going to do, I've been working on a winged blouse, and I'll just show you the picture of it right now because it's not in a great state for me to show you to. It's not done yet, and and I'm still figuring it out. Like some of Virginia's instructions on her sweaters are like cryptic. It's like a secret message. And so the only way to figure out like what in the world she was talking about is to knit the darn thing. And I think that's one of the reasons that like this book has just slipped under the radar for all these decades, and most people have never heard it because you can just like skim it and be like, oh, that's nice. Like, oh, that's nice. She used modular squares. Oh, she had a patent. Oh, that's nice. And just miss it because her writing was so understated, and like her methods were like, I mean, you could miss so much. And I've been working on it for 8 years, and I keep thinking I've figured out all her construction techniques, and then I get to the sweater and I'm like, what the what? Holy cow. Okay, so let me just give you some things to think about, and then we'll dive into it next week, because next week I'm going to have the sweater done and I'm going to be wearing it. Okay, so this is winged blouse. It is not this one. We've already talked about that one. This also, that hat has a mistake in the pattern in the book also, but like we'll touch on that another day. Okay, so there's 2 different ways you could wear this sweater. There's 3 pictures of it in the book. There's, let me show it to you. Let me show you the flat version. This is the flat version, like not on a model. And it's got the scarf thrown forward and it's like tied here. In case you're new here and you don't know what the color coding means, Virginia liked to do different needle sizes. Rather than like change stitch count, she would have you keep the same stitch count, just adjust your needle size so you get a different gauge, and it'll tighten up the fabric in the places where you want it tighter, it'll loosen it up where you want it looser. So like the bust area is made on bigger needles, and the like the chest neck area and these little side things are made on smaller needles. And then this like scarfy thing is made on bigger, looser needles. And so you've got multiple gauges going on. And she does that with almost all her sweater patterns. So the blue is smaller needles, the peach is bigger needles. Okay, so she's got 2 pictures here. And so there's 2 ways you could wear the sweater. You could wear it like with the wing things forward, like kind of, you know, modest during the day, or like if you want a night out, you flip the scarf back and you've got like this bare shouldered thing going on, which is great. But when it's flipped back, she doesn't show you the front of the sweater, so you can't see the neckline. And when it's flipped forward, she doesn't show you the back of the sweater, so you can't see the back of it when it's flipped forward. Okay, so here's where things got like wild for me. So you see this white portion of the sweater here? It like goes down to the bottom of the sweater, like to her navel, right? And it's 2 colors. It's black and it's white. It's got black sleeves and a black like blousey cape scarf thing, and then it's white all the way down here. Make a note of that. 2 colors. White goes down to the waist. Let's look at the thing when it's flat. How many colors are there? There's 3. How far down does the white go? Not to the waist. And what color are the sleeves? Beige, not black. And if you look at the shape over here, like even if you were to like take this white and like stretch the sweater down, you still have got an extra color. And the center part, where in the picture it's like pointing downward toward her navel, it's going the opposite direction in the chart. So what the what? So that's kind of what I've been wrestling with. Besides the fact that the construction method is like, the instructions are like not clear at all. There's 2 different sweaters shown in the book, and there's only instructions for one of the sweaters, but they're both called winged blouse. So I've been wrestling with that. Rose asked if I thought about doing a tiny mock-up. That kind of goes along with the idea of making a gauge swatch. Like, the garment is the gauge swatch. I eyeball it. And number knitting is forgiving enough that, like, I mean, I showed you that Hampton sweater. Like, it should fit a 9-year-old, but it stretches to fit me. And so, like, it'll stretch, it'll shrink a little bit, you know, it's got like a pretty wide ballpark of like sizes it'll fit. So I did not do a gauge swatch. I did not do a tiny mock-up. I just cast on. That's how I roll, which, you know, gets me into trouble. Most of the time it works pretty good though. So Anita wants to know if I have a list of what I have knitted from number knitting and what you want the others to sink their needles into. Ooh, I think not officially. I do. If you go in the Ravelry group, I have like all of the things that I've knit. I've actually set them up as projects, and so I guess you could look in, if you use Ravelry, go into if you. Let's see, let me see if I can find it. There we go. Yeah, so if you go into Ravelry, into the number knitting section, and I think there's a link to this down below. There's 73 patterns, and you can see like which ones have got projects associated with them, and which ones don't. I don't know if there's an easy way to find out like which ones are still needing to be made. I'm thinking probably the easiest way would be to like find all the ones that just have a black and white picture, because generally, you know, when I knit them or when someone else knits them and tags them in Ravelry, I will swap out or like add their picture in here so that it's, oh, I guess I need to do that. Projects too. Yeah. Oh, that's great. Normally, yeah, what I would do is this. Send photo request. And so when Stephanie accepts that as a featured photo, like she'll accept me to use this as in the Ravelry page, it will show up and like swap this picture out. So I guess I don't really have like an official list. I would just have to like, I'd have to do it manually. You know, Rose, years ago, I did have a Google Sheet. I did have a Google Sheet, and because when I first started this, like, you know, 7 years ago, I wasn't doing YouTube. Probably should have been. I'd be a lot further along now, but you know, oh well. So I was just doing things in the Ravelry group, and I like put together a Google Sheet of like, and I was sending out just the individual patterns to people. Like, oh, you want to test the, you know, the whatever sweater? Sure, here you go. Here's the pattern for that. And like most of the time, like nobody would knit it, or like they wouldn't ever finish the project, or like never get back to me. So I kind of stopped doing that because I found that like if someone said, oh, I want to test the diamond design sweater, and I'd be like, yeah, let's, you know, I'll put it up in Yarn Pond, and like people can test it out with the new chart too. But then I discovered there's like, oh, there's a problem with the chart. Like, oh, it only comes in 2 sizes, or like, oh, it's only got 3-inch deep armholes. Like, and people would be like, you know, hey, like, what's wrong with these armholes? Like, what's wrong with this pattern? I'd be like, I don't know. Like, I'm not knitting it. You know, you guys are knitting it. And so then I'd look at the chart and like measure, and I'd be like, oh no. Oh no, I can't just knit. I can't just like give these patterns out to people and like expect them to knit the patterns if they've, you know, one, never done number knitting, and 2, like, I decided, you know, if I'm going to be expecting and asking people to knit these things, like, I need to, unless they want to do it like of their own accord and they have a copy of the book, like, go for it, I'll send you the new chart. But like actively recruiting people to like knit random patterns from the book, I decided like, oh man, like I don't even know what they'd be getting in for. Yeah. Like, because some of these patterns are, you know, some of them are easy, like Hampton sweater. I mean, it's divided squares, like, okay, that's easy. But like this winged blouse, and the bodice blouse with cape scarf, we talked about that the last few weeks. I didn't even bring it out this week because I haven't done anything with it, but it's like, oh man, like I need to personally know like what I'm asking people to do before, and either knit it beforehand or knit it along with them. And so, yeah, so I'm not maintaining the Google Sheet anymore. Yes, we're trying to test out all these, and it's, it's fun. Anyway, so that's that. Yeah, so next week we'll be back, and if you've been working on the Hampton sweater, please do, post your pictures in the Ravelry group. I know it's not super active, and we're a small group, and that's fine. I kind of feel like like what we're doing here, it's not like to gain a massive audience. I mean, that'd be cool, but like that's not really the objective. I mean, we're like historical knitting nerds. I'm probably not going to teach you any new knitting techniques like, brioche or Shetland lace knitting or like anything, like that, like German short rows, like, I don't know, but like I can do garter stitch. And so I feel like what we are doing as a knitting community is like restoring this work, saving this work, bringing light to this work for future, generations to come. And so like so what we're doing is like posterity kind of stuff. It's not so like, Kelly can gain notoriety in the knitting world right now or ever. It's not about me. It's about Virginia and her work. And so I'm just like, feel like I'm a custodian of it, just to try to like, bring attention to her genius. Anyway, so that's what this is about. Anything else that we get out of it is just like bonus, like the Amazon affiliate links. I've made $1.38 now on those, so keep clicking. Yeah, so do share your stuff in the Ravelry group and on Instagram or whatever. It's for the future. It's not about having a big crowd now. Rose said, I made a tiny mock-up of the first 3 units to get a feel. I did a full size for the first 9 or 10 and found too much ease. I restarted with a different box number. That's a good idea. I went kind of I think I went on the small side. I could be wrong, but I mean, we'll see when I put it on. It would be interesting to bring her techniques to modern high fashion. I agree. And where is it? I've been systematically reading through this book, and there's a lot of Virginia's contemporaries in here, which is great. I think I'm on chapter 4 now, and what's interesting about this chapter is it's about modular clothing, and I'm not from the 80s. I'm not far enough into this to like totally understand what that means, but like the ideas that Virginia had back in the 40s, I think they have a lot of validity in today's fashion world, because there's like this backlash against fast fashion and wasteful fashion and everything, and Virginia was like anti all of that. And she really wanted people to make their own clothes. Another tidbit, and we'll wrap this up in just a moment. Have you ever seen when you buy a pattern for, $5, $8, whatever, on Ravelry, and then it says, like in big bold letters down at the bottom, you are not allowed to use my pattern to make anything for sale? Like, first of all, I don't think that really holds up in court. Like, but second of all, like, who cares? I think, like, you're not allowed to sell the pattern. Got it. But like, what if I make a sweater from it and sell the sweater? Like, I'm not selling the pattern. But what's interesting is that in Virginia's book, in Number Knitting, she actually talked about that, how she encouraged people to, here we go, last thing, and then I'll shut up. Okay, so she had this whole chapter about the travel wardrobe, and we talked about that, how she was like a crossover between a knitting magazine and a fashion magazine of the day. She hit this really interesting sweet spot. Like she was like high fashion couture, like that was her thing. And so she talks about fashion and style, but this is what's great. The blouses on these pages may be worn with either a suit, summer or winter, made to order by numbered knitters. The least expensive costs from $20 to $60. And so she already had women using these patterns to knit sweaters for sale to people, and she was encouraging it. You can make them for 1/10 the price or less. And so however you wanted to use her patterns, if you wanted to knit sweaters, because there were fewer career options for women back in the 50s, you could knit sweaters from her patterns and sell the sweaters, or you could make your own sweaters and keep them for yourself. And she was fine with it either way. So she didn't feel this need to like, you're not allowed to knit and sell sweaters from my patterns. Like, anyway, I just caught that today, and one of the continually interesting little tidbits I've missed over the years, and I just stumbled across that, I don't know, yesterday or the day before, and I was like, right on, Virginia. Like, way to empower the knitters. Because nowadays, like, people probably aren't going to make, as a professional knitter, like if that's your job for a living is knitting for people, I mean, you're not going to make very much money for one thing. But like back then, it was like, kind of a viable thing. And she was all for it. So I love that. I love you, Virginia. I wish we could have known her in person. Anyway, that is all. And yes, Ash, you're new here. Thank you so much for coming. And please do like and subscribe. I know YouTubers, they always say that. And, if they say it every single video, I think the algorithm likes it or something. It gets old, but, whatever. I never remind you. So my husband asked me how many subscribers. Today he asked me, how many subscribers do you have? And I was like, 352. And he laughed. Because we were talking about another knitting podcast. And he's like, well, how many does she have? And I was like, 30,000. And he's like, and how many do you have? And I was like, 352. That's okay. I'm thankful for every one of you. Anyway, yeah, so I think that's, you guys are so great. I'm so glad that you're here. I'm so glad that you're here. I'm planning on going to Rhinebeck this year. I skipped last year. Well, I've never gone, so I can't say I skipped it because I've never gone, but I'm planning to go this year. So maybe some of you will be there, and we can all like wear number knitted sweaters together, and people will stop us in our tracks. All right. Yeah, I've talked long enough that my voice is hoarse. It takes a lot longer now than it used to, so I'm going to let you go. I'm going to go get ready for bed and do some knitting and get ready for another big week and see where the week takes us, and come back with some really great Virginia information for you again for next week. So thanks again for coming, and I will see you next time. Bye.